The chandelier over the private dining hall trembled the moment the first call came through. I didn't even have to look at the screen to know who it was. The panic vibrating through my phone might as well have been a siren. Across the table, my grandmother, Grandma Elise, lifted her champagne flute and watched the massive golden doors of the suite slide shut behind the servers. We were alone now. Just the two of us, and the family who believed they still controlled the world on the other end of that ringing device. "Don't answer," Grandma murmured, her voice soft but ironed with resolve. But I did. Not to speak, just to let the call play on speaker so they could hear the music, the echo of crystal, the soft clink of silver. So they could hear exactly where I was. What I'd done. And who I'd chosen. "Isabella," my mother's voice cracked through the line, sharp, frantic, trembling with the realization that her perfect Christmas narrative had shattered. "Where are you? Why is your grandmother with you? What have you done?" Grandma Elise raised her glass. "To new traditions," she whispered. And as if the universe itself approved, the Eiffel Tower beyond our balcony flared to life in glittering gold, its lights cascading in a shimmering curtain over the city. The entire dining hall glowed with it. My mother gasped audibly. My father muttered something about irresponsibility. My brother's wife hissed in the background, "Her colleagues are seeing this, what will they think?" Their panic washed over me like warm sunlight. I felt free. I tapped the screen, ending the call with a soft, decisive beep. The truth was simple. They didn't want me at their family Christmas. So I didn't go. Instead, I brought Grandma to Paris. First class. And that choice was the spark that burned their entire structure down. But that wasn't where the story started. No. It began much earlier, on a cold December evening in Calder Heights, the rain pouring down the windows of my high-rise apartment. Like the world had already begun to mourn something. Before Paris. Before the family meltdown. Before the inheritance war. Before I finally stopped trying to be included in a table where my chair had been quietly removed years ago. Let me take you back to the night it began. I was chopping rosemary in the kitchen when my phone vibrated against the marble counter. A short, polite, surgically worded message. "Christmas this year will be just my son's immediate family. Hope you understand. Just my sons. Not my children. Not my family. Not even my daughter." My mother had perfected the art of hurting without ever sounding unkind. I didn't reread the text. I didn't need to. I felt it cut, clean and familiar, like an old scar being reopened. I typed 4 words back. "Have a wonderful time." Then I set the phone down as if it were a piece of contaminated equipment and returned to the window. The city lights blurred through the rain, Calder Heights glowing like a watercolor done too hastily. My life was built around silence, intentional, curated, controlled. Silence is where I survived. But that night, the silence didn't soothe. It rang. Then my grandmother called. Her ringtone wasn't digital. It was a warm, analog bell, like something from a gentler era. She was the only person I hadn't assigned a sterile sound. "ISA," she said the moment I answered. "Your mother's avoiding my calls. Do you know what she wants everyone to bring for Christmas dinner?" My throat tightened. She didn't know. Of course she didn't. I swallowed the truth before it reached my tongue. "We'll figure it out later," I told her lightly. "Tell me what you're baking." We talked for 15 minutes. I asked about her neighbor, her quilt project, her garden. She laughed, a thin, papery laugh I cherished. When I hung up, I felt heavier. Because I knew the truth. She would never have excluded me. But they hadn't invited her either. She simply wasn't relevant to the performance. Later that night, after reading that text a dozen times, I opened a folder I kept buried beneath old research papers. A travel itinerary I'd drafted months ago but never used. A trip she'd dreamed of once. Paris. A show she'd wanted to see her entire life. A city she'd pictured on postcards pinned above her dresser. Her hip had acted up then. She'd cancelled in a whisper of disappointment. I remembered that whisper now. And something inside me solidified, cold, diamond hard. If they didn't want me for Christmas? Fine. I would build my own. Not small. Not bitter. Not a sad, lonely holiday born from exclusion. No. I would create something so breathtaking, so radiant, so unforgettable that nothing they did, not their curated perfection, not their careful social engineering, not their placid, polite rejection, could touch it. I opened the airline's Elite Tier app. 2 tickets. First class. Calder Heights, Paris. My thumb hovered for a moment. Then I pressed purchase. The screen confirmed. Your flight departs December 21st. Passengers, 2. Cabin, Premier Luxe. My pulse steadied. I opened a new message to Grandma. I have an idea. Paris. And when I hit send, everything shifted. The world didn't feel cold anymore. It felt new. And that was the beginning. The first fault line in a much larger fracture. When I woke the next morning, the sky over Calder Heights was a flat gray sheet, colorless, heavy, expectant. Like the world itself was holding its breath. My mother still hadn't read my message. I didn't expect her to. She loved timing things for effect. I made tea. I let the silence fill the room. Then I opened my laptop. Not because I wanted to think about my family, but because thinking about anything else was how I stayed sane. On the screen flashed the red block in my calendar. A high-security briefing for a software architecture project at Vanguard Systems, where I'd spent the last 8 years building the kind of tools most people never knew existed. My work was complicated, messy, often dangerous. My family never asked about it. If they had, they would have discovered something unsettling. I wasn't the meek, awkward daughter they'd relegated to the corner of every holiday. I was the architect of a cyber defense system powerful enough to cripple half the Fortune 500 if misused. A detail they never learned because they never cared enough to ask. Growing up, the world revolved around my brother, Martin. He was charisma, confidence, easy smiles. I was questions, quiet, and long silences. He brought home trophies. I brought home science fair placards no one bothered to display. He played varsity at Ridgeway High. I stayed late in the computer lab, writing code that teachers didn't even understand enough to grade properly. People clapped when he entered a room. I blended into the wallpaper. And in our family? Being invisible was treated as obedience. I remembered one Christmas when I was 16. I had won a scholarship competition, a regional award. I came home with a letter from the state tech board. I walked into the living room, proud, foolishly hoping they'd be excited. My mother looked up from ironing napkins for dinner. That's nice, ISA. Put it somewhere safe. Then she turned back to discussing table centerpieces with my aunt. That was the moment I learned. There is nothing more painful than being dismissed by people who claim to love you. It doesn't bruise. It empties. While Martin climbed steadily into a respectable bank job and married a woman whose resume sparkled, I rebuilt myself from the bones outward. My first startup failed. Spectacularly. I lived in a one-room studio so small I could touch both walls. I ate cheap noodles for months. I survived on caffeine and instinct. They never visited. They never asked. They never wondered why their calls went unanswered for weeks. If they had, they would have discovered I'd been rebuilding myself from scratch, piece by piece, into something they couldn't measure or belittle. Something that frightened powerful people in boardrooms but meant nothing at a family dinner table. I rose quietly, strategically, relentlessly. When I earned my first major contract with Vanguard Systems, my father texted me. Is it stable? Martin's year-end bonus was impressive. That was it. Every milestone I reached, they overshadowed with something Martin, their immediate family, had done. I became a background character in my own life story. So when that December text came, "This year is just my son's immediate family," something inside me didn't shatter. It snapped cleanly. Like a bone finally breaking after years of hairline fractures. Not with pain. With clarity. Their hierarchy was intentional. Their affection conditional. Their exclusion premeditated. And I was done participating. I wasn't going to beg for entry. I was going to build a new world, one with no doors for them to close. Booking the Paris trip was only the beginning. Because once I pressed purchase, a switch flipped inside me. I didn't just want to take Grandma somewhere. I wanted to give her the life she'd never been allowed to imagine. The life I had built alone. I spent the next 48 hours turning my apartment into a command center. 2 new international phones. A redesigned travel itinerary. A private chauffeur service booked under alias. A penthouse suite in Paris pre-stocked with her favorite flowers. A high-security medical clearance arranged without her even knowing. And, secretly, a digital vault of documents I'd been preparing for months. Because the family trust, the thing they assumed would pass from parent to favored child, was about to change hands. Not for revenge. No. For justice. For balance. For every year my grandmother had been ignored, patronized, used as holiday decor and emotional leverage. She had sacrificed everything for a family that gave her crumbs. I was done letting them feed her scraps. As I finished cross-checking our flight reservations, my encrypted work phone buzzed. Only 3 people had that number. Ms. Rowan, my operations contact, said. "This is Lyons from Vanguard Security. The system flags you set up last week." They lit up. My pulse shifted. What kind of alert? Unusual digital access attempts. A pause. From private devices tied to your last name network cluster. I froze. My family had attempted to dig into my private cloud drive. Not their place. Not their business. And definitely not accidental. What were they trying to open? I asked. 2 items, a financial dossier. And a set of old legal documents. My chest tightened. They weren't just excluding me from Christmas. They were investigating me. Preparing for something. Something that felt like the cold shadow of a much older betrayal. The Vanguard alert gnawed at me long after I ended the call. My family had never cared about my career. They didn't understand my work, didn't ask about it, didn't even try. So why, after years of indifference, were they suddenly attempting to access my private financial and legal data? The timing wasn't coincidence. They excluded me from Christmas. And then, 2 hours later, someone with my family surname attempted to break into files they shouldn't even know existed. It meant only one thing. They were preparing for a conversation I hadn't agreed to. And they were afraid of something. Afraid of me. That was new. Growing up, the Delacourt family trust was spoken about with the kind of hushed reverence people usually reserve for sacred relics. My grandfather had built it over decades. Properties. Investment portfolios. A stake in a manufacturing firm. A charitable fund. Everyone knew how it was supposed to go. My father would inherit control. My uncle would manage operations. My brother Martin would eventually take over the financial advisory role. And me? I was the outlier. The non-essential limb. The daughter who didn't fit neatly into their generational vision. They talked about continuity and legacy. And somehow those concepts never included me. Not once. I'd accepted that long ago. But what no one knew, what no one bothered to learn, was that Grandma Elise, the surviving matriarch, was the sole trustee still alive. The entire empire hinged on her signature. And 2 years earlier, when my startup work had nearly burned me out, I'd taken refuge at her home for a week. One night, unable to sleep, she told me something I never forgot. A quiet confession. Your grandfather wanted you to take over one day, she whispered. Not the others. You. You think differently. You see forward. But your parents, they didn't like that idea. I thought she meant it metaphorically. Until recently. Until I noticed subtle inconsistencies. Missing statements. Documents never shared. Unanswered questions whenever the subject came up. And now the Vanguard alert. They were afraid I would find out the truth. Which meant the truth was bigger than I ever realized. That night, before I picked her up for our flight, I stopped by her house unannounced. Her little brick cottage smelled like cinnamon and old books. She opened the door with a smile, but something flickered behind her eyes. Something sharp, knowing. You shouldn't drive this late, she scolded gently. People in this city cannot be trusted with headlights. Grandma, I said softly, I need to ask you something. She studied my face. Really studied it. Then she sighed and walked to her kitchen drawer, pulling out a thin beige envelope tied with a ribbon that looked older than me. She pressed it into my hands. I knew this day would come, she murmured. Your mother will deny everything. Your father will deflect. They always have. What's in it? The truth, she whispered. But don't open it here. Read it when the sky looks foreign. When you're far enough away to see things clearly. A foreign sky. Paris. The envelope felt heavier than paper should. Something inside it was going to change the direction of my life. Before leaving her house that night, I stepped outside her kitchen to call Vanguard's security line again. Lions, I said quietly, run a second sweep. Check for patterns, not just devices. He hesitated. Patterns of what, Ms. Rowan? Intent. A click of understanding on the other end. 5 minutes later, he came back. Found something. My pulse tightened. What? It wasn't one access attempt. It was 12. All within a 6-hour window. Devices? Different ones, he said. Different IPs. All connected to the Delacourt family cluster. 12 attempts. 12 times they tried to break in. Not curiosity. Not an accident. A coordinated effort. Lions, I said, staring through Grandma's frosted window where she sipped her tea inside, tell me the exact timestamp of the first attempt. He read it off. And when he did, my stomach turned. The first access attempt happened 19 minutes. After my mother sent the text disinviting me from Christmas. They excluded me. And immediately tried to see what I owned, what I controlled, what leverage I had. My hands went cold. This wasn't family politics. This was strategy. The morning we left for Paris, the airport was chaos. Angry lines, crying children, harried travelers dragging overstuffed luggage. But for us? The chaos parted like a curtain. A first-class concierge escorted Grandma in a private line, rolling her suitcase beside her like she was royalty. She kept whispering. ISA, this is too much, this is too grand, this is too expensive. And I kept replying. It's just life, Grandma. The one you deserved years ago. Before boarding, she reached into her purse, pulled out the beige envelope again, and slipped it into my coat pocket. You read it when the world looks different, she said. I didn't know then that the moment I opened it, everything I believed about my family would shift irreversibly. Not gently. Not gradually. But violently. When we settled into our pod seats, curved, enclosed, luxurious, Grandma stared at the space with wide, shimmering eyes. This seat, she whispered incredulously, is bigger than my entire first apartment. I laughed softly. Then my personal phone buzzed. A message from an unsaved number. We need to talk. Before you do something you can't undo. Another. If you're leaving the country, do not involve her. And then? ISA, please. This is serious. Every message came from a different family member. Not one was about missing me at Christmas. Not one asked if I was okay. Not one apologized. They were afraid. But not of losing me. Of losing something else. Something they'd spent years shaping, guarding, planning. And I began to suspect. It wasn't just about excluding me from Christmas. They were trying to keep me away from something. Something that only Grandma's envelope could explain. Hours later, while Grandma slept under a soft navy blanket, the cabin lights dimmed. We were somewhere over the Atlantic. The perfect place for a foreign sky. Perfect place to see things clearly. I pulled the beige envelope from my pocket. The ribbon fell away. Inside was a single sheet of paper. Handwritten. And the first line made my breath stop. Because it wasn't addressed to Grandma. It was addressed to me. From someone I thought I barely remembered. Someone long dead. And someone my family had never spoken about without tension. My grandfather. His handwriting was clean, elegant, severe. And the first sentence read, "If you are reading this, Isabella, then your parents have taken steps to prevent you from assuming what was always meant to be yours." My heart pounded. I scanned the next lines, and felt the ground shift under me. This wasn't inheritance. This wasn't family drama. This was a warning. A secret buried for decades. A truth they'd never intended for me to find. And Paris wasn't just an escape anymore. It was the battleground. The plane hummed softly, steady, calm, unaware that my entire world was tilting beneath me. I stared at the letter, my grandfather's handwriting sharp and deliberate against the cream-colored paper. The ink had faded slightly, but the message was unmistakably alive. He wrote, "They will tell you the trust was designed for the strongest successor. But strength is not noise, popularity, or compliance. Strength is clarity. And you, Isabella, have always seen what others refuse to." My throat tightened. Clarity. I'd spent years questioning whether something was wrong with me, why I seemed to perceive everything differently, why I could sense tension no one else acknowledged, why I'd always been the watcher in every room instead of the performer. I kept reading. "I selected you as the future controller of the trust when you were 10 years old. Your mother and father objected. They claimed you were too quiet, too inward. They wanted Martin. But Martin has the temperament of a politician, not a steward." A chill ran through me. I read the next lines twice, slowly, as if my mind needed time to expand around them. "Your grandmother will activate the succession papers when the time is right. If she has not done so, it is because she fears their retaliation. They grew resentful when I named you. They will stop at nothing to reverse it. Resentment. Retaliation. Stop at nothing." I sat back, my pulse slamming in my ears. My parents, the people who dismissed me, belittled me, excluded me, weren't indifferent. They were threatened. Not by who I was, but by what I had been chosen for. Suddenly, every cold comment made sense. Every overlooked achievement. Every silent Christmas where I was relegated to the far end of the table like a forgotten cousin. They weren't ignoring me. They were containing me. I wasn't invisible. I was inconvenient. My hands shook as I read the closing lines of the letter. "If you are reading this, then the family has already taken steps to remove you. Do not confront them alone. Do not allow them access to your accounts. And whatever you do, protect Elise. She knows more than she has ever said aloud." My gaze shot to Grandma, sleeping peacefully across the aisle. Protect her. From what? From who? I folded the letter carefully and slipped it back into the envelope, my mind spinning through every memory with new, brutal clarity. The exclusion from Christmas wasn't about preference. It was about strategy. They wanted me isolated. Off balance. Cut out of decisions. And the moment I didn't comply. The moment I booked that flight. They panicked. Those frantic texts weren't concern. They were fear. Paris greeted us with a pale winter sunrise, lavender sky, cold light glittering across the tarmac. But beneath its beauty, something shifted in me. This was no longer a holiday. This was a battlefield disguised as a vacation. A private car picked us up on the runway. The driver took our luggage. Grandma's excitement filled the car like perfume. "Oh, ISA," she whispered, gazing out the tinted window. "I never thought I'd see this city again." Again? The word slipped out of her mouth too naturally. I frowned. "Grandma, you've been here before?" She froze, just a flicker, but enough for me to notice. "Yes," she said softly. "Many years ago. Before your grandfather passed." A beat. Before the trust changed hands. Her voice wavered at that last part. And suddenly I knew. She didn't give me the letter casually. This wasn't nostalgia. This was unfinished business. And I had just stepped into the middle of it. The penthouse overlooked the Seine, floor-to-ceiling windows, a terrace filled with winter roses, a dining room that looked like it belonged in a film. Grandma walked in slowly, touching the marble counters, the velvet chairs, the ornate molding with trembling fingers. "I don't deserve this," she murmured. "Yes," I said, my chest tightening, "you do. All of it." But we had barely unpacked when my encrypted work phone buzzed. Lions again. I stepped into the hallway to answer. "Ms. Rowan," he said, his voice low, "we traced a secondary breach attempt." My stomach dropped. "From who?" Silence. Then. "Your father." Air left my lungs. "And we found a pattern," Lyons continued. "They weren't looking for your finances. They were looking for something else." "What?" "A specific document you signed 3 years ago. Something called the Continuity Addendum." My blood went cold. That document had been nearly invisible in a stack of contracts when I'd set up some estate protections. I hadn't thought about it since. "What does it say?" I whispered. Lyons hesitated. "You don't know?" "No." "Then I suggest you find out immediately. Because your family thinks you do. And they're acting like people who are running out of time." I returned to the living room to find Grandma seated at the window, staring out at the river like it held answers. Her hands trembled. "ISA," she whispered without turning, "there's something I should have told you years ago." My pulse rose. This was it. The reason they tried to keep me away. The reason they needed access to my files. The reason the family had been reorganizing behind my back. Grandma looked at me, her eyes bright, afraid, determined. "Your grandfather didn't just choose you for the trust." A long pause. Then. "He left everything to you." I froze. "Everything?" "As in?" "Grandma," I breathed, "the entire Delacourt estate?" "All of it," she whispered. "Property, companies, investments, the foundations, everything." My knees nearly buckled. "I was supposed to tell you when you turned 30, she said. "But your parents, your brother, they became hostile. Controlling. Watching everything I did. I didn't want to put you in danger." Danger. The word struck like lightning. This wasn't drama. This wasn't entitlement. This was power. Generational power. And my family didn't want to lose it. As the truth sank in. As the entire architecture of my old life cracked apart. As I tried to comprehend the scale of what I had inherited. A sound echoed through the penthouse. A sharp, deliberate knock. Grandma's head snapped up. Who is that?" she whispered. I checked the time. Checked the itinerary. Checked the security feed. No deliveries scheduled. No staff expected. No concierge call first. Another knock. Harder. My blood chilled. We were supposed to be alone. Whoever was on the other side of that door had found us before we were ready. And I knew. With a clarity that felt like instinct rather than thought. It wasn't hotel staff. It wasn't security. It wasn't a mistake. It was them. My family. And they had crossed an ocean to confront me. Before I learned the rest of the truth. The knock came again. Harder, sharper, with a rhythm that wasn't a request. Grandma clutched the armrest of the velvet chair. Her breath shook. "ISA," she whispered, "don't open that door." But I already knew who it was. They had crossed borders. Traveled overnight. Rushed here with urgency that had nothing to do with holiday spirit. Because now they knew I had the letter. And the closer I got to the truth, the more desperate they became. My phone buzzed. A message from my father. "Open the door. This is not optional." I almost laughed. He still believed he could command me like a child. Not anymore. I stepped quietly to the security console and tapped the camera feed. 4 figures stood in the hallway. My father. My mother. My brother. And, unexpectedly, Martin's wife, Cassandra. All dressed in expensive winter coats. All tight-jawed. And furious. But the detail that struck me hardest? They looked frightened. Truly frightened. Not of me. Of what I now knew. I muted the feed and turned back to Grandma. "We end this today," I said softly. "No more hiding. No more secrets." Her hand trembled, but she nodded. "Then be careful, ISA," she whispered. "They will do anything to stop you." I cracked it open just enough to step outside and close it behind me, keeping Grandma safely inside. My father lunged forward. "Isabella, what you're doing is reckless." "What I'm doing," I cut in, "is protecting Grandma. And fulfilling what Grandpa intended." His face drained of color. "So they did know." My mother tried to soften her expression, but her voice betrayed her panic. "You don't understand the implications." "No," I said. "You don't understand that your control ends today." Cassandra crossed her arms, her expression coiling with contempt. "Do you have any idea what will happen if you take over?" she snapped. "Our reputations, our stability, everything we've built." I stared at her coldly. "You built nothing. You married into a legacy you expected to profit from." Her cheeks flushed. Martin stepped forward then, voice tight. "ISA, this isn't about you. This is about what's fair." Fair. The word almost made me laugh. Years of dismissal, erasure, exclusion, and now they invoked fairness? I let the silence hang for a moment, then said, "Let's talk." "But we're not doing it in the hallway." I opened the door, stepping aside. But instead of inviting them in, I pointed down the hall toward the private lounge reserved for penthouse guests. Neutral ground. "I'll meet you there in 2 minutes," I said. "Alone." My father bristled. "We're not negotiating on your terms." "You don't have terms anymore." He froze. And something in him cracked. In the quietest, most satisfying way. When I entered, they were already seated around a low marble table, stiff-backed and pale. My mother was the first to speak. "Isabella, please. We just need access to the continuity addendum." So it was true. They had come to Paris for one document. "What do you think it says?" I asked calmly. My father inhaled sharply. "We know what it says. Your grandfather made reckless changes at the end of his life. He wasn't thinking clearly. He gave you authority he never meant for you to use. Then why hide it from me?" That question made every head in the room jerk slightly. Because they hadn't expected me to ask it. They'd expected fear. Apology. Compliance. They didn't know me at all. My mother folded her hands tightly, like she was holding herself together. We knew if you learned about the succession clause too early, you'd be influenced. By who? I asked. Grandma's name hovered in the space like an unspoken threat. My father sighed heavily. Isabella, your grandmother has always resented us. She manipulated your grandfather. She made him believe Martin wasn't ready. She pushed him to choose you, someone without the temperament, the experience. I cut him off. Experience? I architect cybersecurity systems for world governments and corporations. What does Martin do? The silence was brutal. Martin swallowed hard. My mother leaned forward. We don't want to fight. But you have something that was never meant for you. That document could transfer full controlling interest to you immediately. I stared. And that scares you? My father stood up abruptly. Yes, it scares us. Because you don't understand how dangerous this power is. Your decisions could destroy everything our family built for generations. Grandpa chose me, I said quietly. Not you. Not Martin. Me. My father's face twisted with something ugly. Your grandfather was sick, he snapped. He was confused. Your grandmother put ideas in his head to spite us. And right then, I realized the truth. This wasn't about fairness. Or legacy. Or stability. This was about ego. My father had expected to inherit everything. Martin had expected to inherit it from him. And I, quiet, observant, underestimated, was the threat they never accounted for. Then Cassandra spoke, her voice soft but venomous. You're going to give us access to the addendum. You will sign what we've prepared. And then we'll go back to being a normal family. Normal. I almost smiled. Cassandra, I said coolly, a normal family doesn't ambush their daughter in another country. Her jaw tightened. What choice did we have? I stood. You had dozens of choices. But you picked the one that ends your control. My father's eyes darkened. What are you going to do, Isabella? Exactly what Grandpa intended. I left them in the lounge, their faces pale with the dawning realization that they had lost something they had always assumed was theirs by birthright. As I approached the penthouse, my heartbeat steadied. Not fast. Not frightened. Steady. Certain. Inside, Grandma looked up anxiously. Are you all right, ISA? I knelt beside her chair and placed the letter in her hands. I know everything now, I said softly. And I'm not afraid. Tears welled in her eyes. Oh, my darling. I should have told you sooner. No, I whispered, you told me at the perfect time. I pulled up the secure digital vault on my tablet. Inside was every document I needed. The original trust agreement. My grandfather's succession designation. The continuity addendum. And a notarized file Grandma had secretly signed years ago, the one that legally placed the transition of control solely in my hands. She squeezed my hand. Your grandfather saw you, she whispered. Long before anyone else did. For the first time in my life, I felt it. I wasn't invisible. I was inevitable. I took a deep breath and executed the digital transfer sequence, the one that activated the succession clause. My name populated the master control registry. My grandfather's legacy. The entire Delacourt estate. Was mine. All of it. A quiet chime confirmed the activation. Grandma exhaled shakily. It's done, ISA. Yes, I said, standing slowly. And I'm going to protect it. Protect you. Protect the future Grandpa trusted me with. My tablet vibrated. 10 missed calls from my family. 3 new messages. All frantic. Then one final message from my mother. Isabella, please. We never meant for things to go this far. I turned off the tablet. They had spent years diminishing me, doubting me, excluding me. And yet, somehow, against all their calculations, I became the one person they couldn't stop. That evening, Grandma and I sat in the private dining hall, overlooking the glittering Paris skyline. She lifted her glass with a trembling smile. "To freedom," she whispered. I clinked my glass against hers. "To new traditions," I said. And for the first time in my life, I felt the weight of the world shift. Because of a choice I made. They didn't invite me to family Christmas. So I took the only family member who ever loved me without condition. To Paris. First class. To celebrate the beginning of a legacy they could no longer control. And somewhere across the city, my phone kept vibrating. My family trying desperately to reach me. But this time? This Christmas? I let it ring. Please click the subscribe button, like, share and comment. This will encourage me to make more interesting stories. Also let's know where you are watching from. Thank you and see you in the next story.